it's Kari at StudioR12 Stencils. We recently made a trip to the Dollar Tree to find some fun things to stencil on. I grabbed some books and today we're gonna test it out. Okay, let's get started. We recently went on a field trip to the Dollar Tree to try to find some fun things that we could try to stencil on, and the bookworm and me had to grab some books. So we went through the bargain bin and found some books that they had multiples of. We loved the thickness of this book and that it had a white cover because the options are endless. So then we started doing a little bit of research to find what we could paint on the books and found the cutest ideas on Pinterest and wanted to try it ourselves. So today we're doing a fun Valentine's Day project that I think you're going to love. We're gonna show you how to do a texture on the spines of the books. We're going to show you how to stencil on the books and what adhesives we recommend. And then we have a little surprise for you at the end. So let's get started. So as we're working on covering these books, there's a little bit of a texture here where the title and the author is. So we were trying to figure out how to cover that so that we could paint over top of it. And that is where our fun friend, the modeling paste, is going to come in. If you have not painted with modeling paste before, it is super fun. We have this great project that we've done showing how to make a raised texture through your stencil. So we'll link that below. This Merry Christmas is done with the modeling paste, so it has that 3D effect and it really just adds a pop to your projects. So we are going to put out a little bit of modeling paste on our palette paper, and then we're going to go ahead and add some white paint into the paste just to give it a little bit of a more white tint. We're going to use our wide palette knife. This is a flat palette knife. It's really thick. We also have a couple different ones. Let's see, this is an Italian offset. It's really teeny tiny. So each of them have their own use, but the wide palette knife is the one that we like to use for spreading. So it's kind of going to be like when you are icing a cake. We're going to mix in our paint and our modeling paste. Get it nice and mixed. Wipe it off here on the edge, and then we're just going to grab just a little bit here, just like you would do with getting some icing for your cake. Then we're going to just scrape it on here just like you're icing a cake, nice thin layers. And you can do it left and right, you can do it side to side. We tried it both ways and we found that going the short way on the spine of the book was the easiest. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do it. We tried a couple different ways and wanted to see what we liked best. So the first thing we're doing here is just trying to fill in the little bit of the gaps where the words are for the title and the author. So we're just scraping real nice and smooth. If it comes over on the edge, use your finger as a paintbrush. You can just wipe that off. And then we're just grabbing a little bit, smoothing it along the way. All right, so now we have our first layer on. The thing with modeling paste is it takes a while to dry. So what we'll do is we will grab the hair dryer and we will get a little bit of this dry before putting on our second coat. All right, so it's not all the way dry yet. When we did our practice ones for you guys, we waited an entire weekend from the time that we put the modeling paste on until we went back to paint on it. So you'll definitely want to give it time to dry. It will feel cool to the touch when it's still wet. You can definitely feel that it's cool right now, even after I have used the hair dryer on it. So let's take a close-up look here. So you can see that it's starting to fill in the areas where the title and the author were, but it still has a little bit of texture. So we're going to do a second layer of the modeling paste on the spine. I'm going to turn it around and do it the other way so that it's a little bit even. Since we're pulling with the modeling paste, we want to kind of give a ridge on both sides here. Now, if you have a really smooth hand and you can get this to be really smooth, our initial thought was that we were just going to use the modeling paste and that we were going to be able to get a really smooth edge and just stencil over top of it. However, we still had a little bit of ridges that I wasn't entirely happy with how it turned out. So that's why I went with the more textured look. And I'm going to show you how to do that after we get this second layer on here. All right, we're going to blow dry this one more time, and then we are going to add the texture. Okay, almost there. So one thing that you can do is you can grab a sheet of sandpaper. This is a 160 grit. So the higher the grit, the finer the sandpaper. And you can go along your edges. Once it's dry, it's still a little wet, so it's a little gummy along our edges right now. But once it's dry, you can go along it. And I can show you on this one that's finished. That you can just kind of smooth off the edges. Or if you're looking for an entirely smooth surface, you can use your sandpaper to do a little bit of smoothing once it's entirely dry. So just a little trick. If you want it to be a little bit smoother, then you can use your sandpaper. All right, so now we're going to go into make it the textured surface, which we are absolutely loving after we let it dry. So to make your textured surface, you're just going to smooth it on, kind of like you did with when you're doing your icing of your cake. But then you're just going to kind of move it around. You're going to get it stuck in there. You're going to lift it up a little bit. It's kind of like you're doing a little bit of a spackle. Just moving it around, getting your palette knife stuck, moving it. We're not really pulling because we don't want it to have a smooth surface. So we're just kind of moving it around. And wherever it goes, it goes. This looks super cool. I'm going to grab just a little bit more so we can get this book finished here and then move on to the stenciling. So we're just using our little honey bottles for our paint. We recommend using acrylic paint. Any good acrylic paint will do. We buy ours in bulk because we paint a lot. So we get the honey jars just because they're easier to pour out of than big bottles of paint. All right, so we're just smoothing along here. This looks super cool. I actually think I like this one a little bit better than the other ones that I've done. Has a little bit more texture. Now I will say that if you are planning on stenciling on top of this, you don't want to get too much texture, because if you do it too thick, then you're going to have a hard time using the stencil on it. So you do have to keep that in mind, that if you're using a stencil, you don't want it to be too textured. Otherwise, your stencil will not stick to it, and you have the chance of bleeding under because there's going to be textures and ridges. All right, I am happy with how that turned out. Got a nice little textured look here, and we will set it aside and move on to stenciling. So this is one that we have already done for you. Since we're doing a Valentine's Day theme, we're gonna do some hugs and kisses, maybe a little hearts, and we're gonna top it off real nice at the end. So what we did here was we just stenciled hugs. This is a super easy stencil project. Doesn't take a lot of time, but I wanted to show you some fun things. We have, I think, 34 different full alphabet designs. So we'll make sure that we share that collection with you. They come with a capitalized alphabet, a lowercase alphabet, and some numbers and some fun different little $, your @ sign, your ampersand. So you have all kinds of things that you can number and letter with. We also have them in a bunch of different sizes. So we have the teeny tiny ones. Then we have a little bit bigger. Then we have the size that we're using today. Here's a bigger size, and then even a more ginormous size, so that you have all kinds of different options for lettering. And then we also have our new fun lettering tool. We'll have a video that we can share with you guys below so that you can get all the tips and tricks on how to use this. But we are going to use this to make sure that our letters are straight on our book. So we have hugs for the first one. So for the second one, I think we're going to do XOXO and maybe even add a couple of hearts. So I have my stencil here. Now, I don't know if you can see, but on the back of the stencil, since we're using a raised texture surface, we decided to put some adhesive on the back of the stencil so that it wouldn't go anywhere. So we can tape it down, but the adhesive is also going to help with making sure the stencil doesn't move on the texture. So what we used on this was Aleene's Stick and Restick. We have a video that we did recently where we researched tons of different adhesives and found the ones that we liked the best, and this one was at the top of the pack. So what we did to get it on the back of the stencil, we just opened it up and put it all around the edges of the stencil, and then I used one of our polyfoam brushes and just sweeped it around, making sure it was on the edges, making sure that it was between each line of the letters. And then I let it sit. You know that it is ready to go when it goes from white to clear. So I've already used this once on the hugs, and I'm going to use it again on the XOXO. We're going to start with our stenciling tool, and we're going to use our triple threat. This is a pencil that has a stylus, it has a white lead, and then it also has a black lead, and then it also has an eraser. So it has all kinds of fun things in it, and it's a really great tool for marking your projects. So with this lettering tool, you can see that there's a ruler across the bottom, and then it has a bunch of little dots along the way. So that's something that you can use to make dots for your straight line so that you can line up your letters so that they are in the line and in a straight line that you want. So there's a couple different ways we can do this, and I just used the bottom of the stencil across the bottom of the book so that I could line it up that way. Now I'm just using my lead to make dots along the edge here, so then I know where to line up my stencil to put my letters. We get so many questions about, well, how do you know where to put your letters and how can you line them up? So that's what we're working on showing you today. So with my stencil, I know that I want 4, I'm gonna have XOXO. So I have the 4 letters here. So I know I want my X to be about where this U is. And I know that, if you can see in the overhead camera here, you can kind of see the little dots that I made. I'm gonna line up my stencil so those are on the very bottom of the stencil so that my paint will cover it up. So I'm gonna make a little mark here, and that's where I wanna put my X. All right, so this is where we're gonna start. And our stencil has the stick and restick on it, so we're just going to push it down, and then we will still hold it because it doesn't have a whole lot of area to stick to. Now with your palette knife, with the modeling paste, when modeling paste dries, it hardens quite a bit. So when you're done with your modeling paste, you want to get that palette knife dry and get it nice and cleaned off. Otherwise, you're going to have crusty modeling paste. This was from a previous project that is going to stick to your knife and it'll ruin your knife. All right, so I think we're gonna do the XOXO in red today, just to add a little pop of color. Just gonna put a little bit of it out on our palette and bring our stencil back up here. Okay, so as we're preparing to get our stencil on here, we're going to grab this is a smaller of our dome brushes. We don't want to use our largest size because there are letters beside of it. So you can do a couple different things here. We can, I want to put that down and get the sticky on the back. We can grab some tape and you can tape off around the letters that you're not using, or you can use our StudioR12 multi-masker, which is right here. Maybe. Here we go. And you can use this to mask off the letters that you're not wanting to use. So I'm gonna grab tape here because I still want to be able to have a hand to hold my stencil down. And if I'm using the multi-masker, I'm gonna have to hold the multi-masker and the stencil. So we're gonna grab some paint. This is something that's very important. So we grab our paint and we come to our paper towel and we do 15 swirls just to offload some of the goopy paint. This is a stencil basics, but it's even more important when you are using something that has a texture background, because there are more places for bleed through because of that texture and raised surface. And then we are just going to stipple. Stipple is an up and down patting motion, because when we stipple, we're not going to be pulling the stencil and moving the stencil around. We're going to do a couple layers here. I'm going to hit the blow dryer and then we'll do one more layer. So one thing to keep in mind when you are marking your surface for where you want to line up your letters. When I did hugs, I was using black paint, so it covered up my pencil mark. Now, since I am using red paint, you can still see my pencil mark. So we'll have to see if we can use an eraser to get that erased, or if we'll just have to go underneath of it and kind of erase that before we start to paint so that we don't have that black mark popping through. All right, so I'm gonna hit this with the blow dryer one more time so it can dry before I lay my stencil down. If we lay our stencil down now while this paint is still wet, we're gonna get paint on the back of our stencil, and then every time we move, then we're going to get red paint on our white background. All right, so let's head over to our O. So the cool thing about these stencils is that since they are side by side, they're already kind of lined and separated for us. So we can put the O beside of our X. We'll use the N to line it up, and then we'll put down our O. You can grab a couple pieces of tape here to mask off the N and the P. We're once again using the little pencil marks at the along the bottom of our book to know where to line that up, and we can also use the letters, make it really easy for us because they all kind of have this, they're all the same font, so you have the same top and bottom on our X as we have in our N, so we can just stick that right over top and know where it goes. Okay, so we have our X and we have our O done. Look how cute that looks with the little pop of red. So to finish this off, we're gonna do one more X and one more O, and then we're gonna move on. All right, who's ready for the big reveal? I'm gonna take off our stencil and ta-da! Look how cute that is. It has a little XOXO. And then when we stack them, how adorable is that? Now, we're not quite done with the XOXO. I'm actually going to do a little something else. We have these amazing mini pattern stencils. We have dots and stars and checks and snowflakes, all kinds of fun little things, bats, that can just add a little pop to your project. So since we're doing a Valentine's Day thing, I think I'm gonna put a little heart right at the end of my XO. So I'm going to grab some tape because where these are so close together, we do not want to get hearts ghosting and hearts bleeding under. So I'm going to just tape off right around the edge here so I can make sure that no other hearts are going to get involved in this little project. And I'm going to tape off around the edge too, just so we can make sure that we don't ghost off the edge of our stencil. So this is going to be just a really well taped off heart. Here we go. So we have a nice little, all you can see is the heart. We're going to bring it back over to our project, but we're not just going to use red here. I'm going to get out the modeling paste and we are going to make a raised heart. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can go ahead and make it white and you can paint over it once it's dry, or you can add a little bit of paint into this. Now, since it's red, there is a chance it'll turn pink, so let's test it out. Let's do this one together so we can see what's going to work. So it is starting to change just a little bit compared to what it was when it was plain, but I still think I like it well enough that we're gonna try it out here. So we're gonna grab a little bit of our red. Now we don't have much room to work with, so this is what's gonna make it a little difficult here. Now we're just going to fill in our red, fill in our little heart, just like we're decorating a cake. Just a little bit of paint and a little bit of the modeling paste. All right, I am super excited to see once we pull this off. I am gonna blow dry it just a little bit. And it's gonna be the same thing with your stencil as with your palette knife. Once you are done with the modeling paste, you want to rinse off your stencil to get that modeling paste off of it while it is still wet. Otherwise, it's gonna harden and you're gonna have a really hard time getting it off. All right, let's see if this worked. We have a little bit pulling up here. All right, so we have our little heart. Doesn't have full definition with the stencil. So one of the things that I did here was when I was mixing it, our rule of thumb is to do 1/3 paint and 2/3 of the modeling paste. So I think I did a little too much paint instead of the modeling paste. And so what that would have done is it would have watered the modeling paste down so that we didn't get that full effect of the raised texture. So it's definitely raised. It is still super cute. It just doesn't have the definition on there. So what can we do with it? We can let it dry and we can paint over it. We can take a black Sharpie marker and we can draw around it and define it, or we can just paint over a little bit more of the white texture to do the textured and then paint our heart back over it. Okay, so now we still have these dots on the bottom. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our eraser and we are just going to use our eraser and erase right over those so we can get rid of our little lines. So the ones under the paint are not coming up, so just note to self, when you are using your pencil, you're going to want to do it in an area that you can erase. If it doesn't erase, that's underneath of it, that's okay, because then we can go in with a tiny liner brush and some white paint, and we can go in here and just patch the little bit of the edges that have the little pencil marks, and good to go. You can also use your liner brush. So with the raised texture and with your stencils, there's always going to be a chance of bleeding under when you're using a raised texture, because you're going to have some areas that are bigger, some areas that are smaller. And so you can go through with your liner brush at the very end and just go around your letters if you have any places that you want to do a little bit of work with. Earlier when I was doing one of the hugs, I got a little excited and I started painting and not thinking about the letters being beside each other, so I ghosted under a little bit. So I just grabbed a little bit of white paint and we got that all cleaned off and we're good to go. So as we are cleaning brushes, we have a couple videos that we'll link below on how to clean brushes, and we go through almost all of the brushes that we have here at StudioR12 Stencils so that you can know how to take care of all the brushes that you have to make them last. Okay, so our heart is drying. We have our hugs, we have our XOXO, and this is still drying as well, but I want to show you what we would do to finish off this project. I'm going to grab, I went and rated all of our ribbons and bows. So we have lots of fun things to choose from. The beauty of working in a crafty place is to have all kinds of things that you can use. So what we're going to do is I got some of the Aleene's tacky glue. You can also use a hot glue gun for this. We are going to, I think I'm going to open this and use this new one. What we'll do is we'll just measure around our books so we know how long to go. Here. And then I want to layer it. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to move my paint out of the way so we don't get paint everywhere. And I'm going to use this as well to layer on top of it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to wrap it around several times. So we are going to put our main ribbon on, and what we would do is we would tape it to, or glue it to the back of the books where you want it to be. Have it nice and tight, and then glue the ribbon together so that it's going to be on the bottom, and then you have a nice flat area for it. There we go. And then what we're going to do is I'm just going to tape this for now so I can show you what it would look like. Grab our handy dandy stretchy tape. Okay. Then we're going to grab our twine, our little rope, and we're just going to wrap and wrap and wrap to give it a nice extra little texture here. And also making sure that the end piece is also in the back so that you have a place that you can glue it down. We'll cut that off. So then when you are done, there you go. You have your cute little ribbon. You have your string wrapped around it. You could make a bow and add a bow to the edge as well. We're gonna finish this off and put on kisses, so it's hugs and kisses. And you could even add something to the front of it. If you have, you could put a monogram here, you could put a fun little Valentine's thing here, you could do a little love quote, so then the top book also has something on it. So we hope that you love our fun little book stack that we made, upcycled from the Dollar Tree, and we can't wait to see what you do for Valentine's Day with your stencils this year.